Good morning, class. I am your instructor for today. You can call me Teacher Ali. So before we start, I want you to solve these jumbled letters. Don't worry because these jumbled letters are actually easy as 1, 2, 3. So let's go. So if your answers are character, plot, conflict, theme, and setting, you are right. I want you to remember these words because these words are connected for our topic for today. So here are the objectives for today. Upon completion of this lesson, students will be able to identify and label the elements of a story. Second, apply the elements of a story in a small group writing. So let's start our lesson for today. Does anyone of you know about Greek mythology? Myths that's about gods and goddesses. There are actually 12 main gods and goddesses in Greek mythology. Are you familiar with Hades? Hades was the god of the underworld, and the name eventually came to also describe the home of the dead as well. So today, we will know one of his famous myths in which he fell in love with someone. So we will watch a video clip that I saw on YouTube that talks about how Hades and Persephone met.
The Etna volcano was in full eruption, a sign that Typhon, the monster imprisoned by Zeus, was especially unhappy. The tremors caused by the volcanoes left Hades, the lord of the underworld, worried. He feared that these tremors would split the earth and bring light to the world of darkness. So he climbs to the surface to better analyze the situation. Meanwhile, Aphrodite and her son Eros, also known by the Romans as Cupid, were watching Persephone, the goddess of spring. Eros and Aphrodite were offended by the fact that both the goddess Athena and the goddess Artemis were virgin and pure, and thus denied the impulses of passion and love. And the young Persephone was on the same path, so much so that in order to maintain her chastity, her mother, the goddess Demeter, took her away from Mount Olympus, since she was constantly besieged by various gods. Aphrodite realized that Hades was moving in the direction of Persephone. Hades was another who could avoid the influence of the goddess of love, since he lived in the underworld. But Aphrodite believed that this is the time to change that. Eros chooses his sharpest arrow and strikes the heart of the god of the underworld. Hades does not perceive anything, for the arrows of Eros cannot be detected, but when precise, have a devastating impact. When confronted with Persephone, Hades is seized by an enthralling impulse. He was hopelessly in love. Impetuously, Hades grabs his beloved and causes the earth to open so that he may return to his domain. Demeter, the mother of Persephone and the goddess of the crops, misses her daughter and goes around the world in search of her girl. After much searching, she meets one of the nymphs who used to accompany her daughter. She tells her how Hades kidnapped her and led her into the underworld through the land that opened up. Demeter, due to her deep sadness for not finding her daughter, the goddess will eventually neglect her tasks, and thus the land became infertile and the crops were lost. Knowing her daughter's fate, Demeter turns to Zeus so that he would force Hades to return her daughter. Reluctantly, Zeus says he cannot do anything, since Hades is sovereign in his territory. Demeter threatens to make the world infertile forever, since the land was complicit in her daughter's abduction by opening the way to the underworld. Zeus, alarmed by the threat, decides that Persephone may return to the surface as long as she has not eaten anything offered by Hades. The supreme god allows Hermes to lead Demeter to the underworld so that she could rescue her daughter. When she got there, she discovered that Persephone had already eaten a pomegranate offered by Hades, and so her bond with the underworld could not be totally undone. Demeter is appalled, and to soften the relationship with her mother-in-law, Hades proposes that Persephone spends half the year with each one of them. Sealing the agreement, Persephone can return to the surface with her mother. From the soil that was infertile began to sprout flowers in great quantity. The harvests were again full. But the period of encounters between Persephone and Demeter is exhausted, and the young goddess has to return to the underworld to stay with her husband. Demeter is devastated to see her daughter leave, and depression returns to neglect her tasks. However, with the return of her daughter after the period with her husband, everything returns to flourish. And so the seasons begin.
So that's it, class. That's the story of Hades and Persephone. If you are wondering if Persephone loved Hades, in some other tale or version of this story, Persephone told her mother that she loved her husband, but she also wanted to be with her mother. So after reading the story of Hades and Persephone, we will now discuss about the elements of the story. So first we have character. Character is a person or sometimes an animal who takes part in action on the story or other literary work. So in the story that I have shown to you a while ago, the characters in the story are Persephone, Hades, Demeter, and Zeus. Now we have the setting. Setting is a time when or where did the story takes place or happen. Authors often use descriptions of landscape, scenery, buildings, seasons, or weather to provide a strong setting. So the setting of the story in Hades and Persephone, the story takes place in the ancient Greece. Third is we have the theme. The theme is the meaning behind the events and characters' action in the story. It is not a plot summary. So some people say that the story of Hades and Persephone was also entitled as the Rape of Persephone, but little did we know, Hades did this because of his love towards Persephone. So we now have the conflict. Conflict, it is any of the problems that a character encounters in the story. It is the struggle between two people or things in the story. So the struggle of a character may go against him and an important character, him against the forces of nature, him against society, or also him and something inside himself. One of the conflicts in the story of Hades and Persephone is how Zeus convinced Hades to bring back her daughter Persephone to Demeter. So I want you to identify those conflicts and write it on your notebook. Now we have plot. Plot, it is a pattern of events that develop between the interactions of the characters. We have 5 elements of plot. First is the exposition. It is the start or introduction of the story, the background information that the reader must have in order to understand the story. This is where the characters and setting are introduced. Next is we have the rising action, all of the events that take place leading up to the climax. This is where the reader is introduced to the conflict. Next is we have the climax, the most interesting part of the story, the turning point in the story. Here, the story is turned in a different direction toward the conclusion. So we have now the falling action. It is the immediate reaction to the climax, all the action that occur after the climax and before the conclusion of the story. And lastly, the resolution. It is the conclusion of the plot. Those ends are tied up. There might not be a clear resolution, and it is called a cliffhanger ending. So in the story of Hades and Persephone, the story revolves how Hades fell in love with Persephone and decided to kidnap her. A lover boy decided to kidnap his lover? Interesting, isn't it? So class, these are the elements of a story. Again, character, setting, plot, theme, and conflict. These elements can also help you to write the story and help you to understand more about the story. Understood? Did you get me, class? Okay. That's it for today, class. So for your assignment, I want you to write a short story of your own. Be creative, use your imagination, and please don't forget to include the elements of a short story or a story. So I will pick 5 students to read their work tomorrow. So that would be all. Just please don't forget your assignment, just like what they did to you. So let's see each other again tomorrow. Bye!